everyone. It's Margaret Manning here with 60 and Me. This is the place where women who are aging beautifully come to be inspired. And my guest today is Dr. Dale Atkins. Dale is a licensed psychologist, a speaker, and an author. She's had 25 plus years of experience as a relationship expert. And the focus of her practice, which is in New York City, is on families and parenting, also aging well and how to live a very balanced life. Now, she's the author of 7 books, and she's also written a brand new one, which I am so excited to introduce you to, called The Kindness Advantage. She co-wrote this book with Amanda Scholzer, and this is a book that I think is so radical in its thinking and so simple. It's about how to incorporate kindness into your life, into your business. And so welcome to the show, Dale.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm so happy to be here with you again. It's lovely after so many years to reconnect.
Yeah, it's been 3 years now. We talked about, basically the same things that no different things, but around relationships, all around how we work out relationships with people. But this is very specific. And what I love about what you've done here with this book is you've laid out the sort of foundation for how important it is to have kindness as your North Star, as your point at your compass. But also how it can help you with your well-being and health. We've talked about that in a previous talk. And also now we want to chat about how it can be applied to business. So not just for the company itself, the brand, but also the employers, the people that are the managers and leaders, and the employees. So talk about the dynamic in the workplace for us.
Well, the dynamic in the workplace is changing, and fortunately, a lot of what Amanda Solzauer and I in our book were discovering, there is a lot of research going on in the world of adults that talks about how important it is to have collaborative workplaces. Right. And what does that mean? Where people are kind to each other, respectful, they pay attention to each other, they have compassion for where the other person is, and they really look at each other as individuals. One of the fundamentals that we have identified in kindness is being yourself, authenticity. Yeah. We look at it in the context of trying to encourage your children to be the best they can be and who they are authentically, and use that talent and that strength for good. And in the workplace, one of the things that really makes a difference is when people feel that they are identified and appreciated for who they are and the unique quality that they bring to work when they come to work. And of course, when that is recognized, and not a flyby recognition like, oh, thanks, that was a good job, which, by the way, is okay, but it's not nearly as effective or motivating to the worker or gratifying to the supervisor or peer, by the way, as the way you added that special touch of how you write so well to this particular report. Only you can do that, or whatever it is, or the way the way you went back and looked over those numbers because we were doing it so quickly, and you found that error. It made such a difference to the end goal, and your ability to focus in that way is really great. Now, there are a lot of people who think, well, of course, I give them a paycheck. Why should I have to do this? Yes, you give them a paycheck, and that's the contract for work, but how we interact with people and what happens in that interaction, that relationship, is really what really affects how people enjoy, flourish, grow in their workplaces. So that it's not really a transactional relationship, it is a relational relationship. When you know who people are, you are then much more likely to engage with them as human beings, not just widgets. And when we're kind to ourselves, we are more likely to be able to bring our authentic selves, our whole selves, to work. Especially now, Margaret, there's so much overlap with work and home, because with smartphones and with technology, I don't even know anybody who's 9 to 5. And it's so hard for people to turn off their phones when they get home, and they're kind of looking at them and getting, they just this one more call or just this one more email.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stress and pressure on what happened. I didn't hear from you last night. I emailed you, or I texted you, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think what's important is to understand what the expectations are of our workers and supervisors and or peers, and to understand that if you have a life outside of your work life and you perceive or someone else perceives that puts you either at an advantage or a disadvantage from your workmates, that you have to know what that means. If you turn your phone off from 7 o'clock till 7 o'clock because you're with your children or you're doing whatever you're doing and it's not work oriented, everyone else in your office is online, then that's really not a fair playing field.
No.
So you've got to be able to say what the rules are and understand if you can play by those rules. Another thing that's really important, so often people don't know how they're doing, and the example I gave before is important. Another important thing for particularly supervisors to do, bosses to do, is not wait for the yearly review to give feedback, but to really be able to observe and say, how do you think you're doing on this particular project? And exactly what you're doing is perfect, don't change a thing, as opposed to waiting 9 months to see, did I do it right? Did I not do it right? Or, I like what you're doing, or I don't like what you're doing, and I'd like you to try it this way. That is very valuable to see if the person who's working for you knows how to make those changes. Right. The other thing is in collegial relationships, to try and be human, to try and develop trust, to try and accept and offer vulnerability. That if your strength is not in area A, but a colleague's strength is in area A, what would it be like to be able to have a moment with that colleague and say, I really admire the way you do that. Is there any way that you can kind of give me a primer and I could I won't come up to speed, but at least I won't feel so anxious every time I'm asked to do something in that wheelhouse.
I think
to have that. Yes, go on.
So no, what I was going to say is that it was reminding me of another conversation that we had earlier about raising children. We were talking about in school, children are measured on their performance and the black and white test results, but not on the what they brought to the engagement, what skills, what human skills. And it's the same thing in the workplace here, where people. I worked in a corporation, a very large corporation. A lot of women in our 60&Me community did too.
Yes.
We all know the corporate game, which is your manager is usually focused on measuring your performance, which is, we have one-on-ones, one-on-one meetings every month or every, regularly check-ins, but it's mostly on the performance review at the end of a period, half yearly or annually. And those are based on numbers, not on the heart you put into it or the authenticity or the spirit. And I think that starts for me anyway, with the company I work for, at the very top, the actual the very, very top person. And as you get people that are more empathetic into strong leadership positions, they are the reminders of what exactly you've just said. Most people in a meeting are thinking they've got their talking points. They're not listening at all to what the other contributors are saying. Right. They've just got 10 things that they've come into the meeting that they've got to say, and they wait for that opportunity to jump in and say that check box, because they know that's what they're going to be measured on at the end of it's just very soul destroying, I think. And what you've described is so challenging in a lot of corporations that are driven by a profit motive, and they don't.
It is true, but
it's hard. But
it is absolutely true, but it's changing.
Yes,
it's changing.
I think so.
It is. And the thing that's so interesting is that the bottom line is also reflecting what happens when you have more content people working for you. And what we're also realizing in some of the research is that peer support is as important, and peer feedback is as important as the supervisors, particularly with flex time and people working from home and talking the way we're talking.
Yeah.
To be able to have other people around you in your work community pay attention to what you bring to the table and value that. And those kinds of opportunities for feedback and collaboration are really what's making the difference in companies today. I mean, Amanda and I are being asked to come to companies to talk about kindness in the workplace and how we can really address it. And my first question is, who are your kindness role models? And who's been kind to you today in your office area? And who are you kind to? And how can you be kinder in your collegial connections, and what are the things that are important to you, and what are the things that are important to your colleagues that may or may not have anything to do with the numbers, but in reality have everything to do with the numbers. Because when you have people who are content and spiritually, motivated and emotionally engaged and intellectually challenged, without feeling that their head is going to be cut off, but that we're all in this together and we do have a common goal, it is that sense of community. Now, certain people are dog eat dog. There's no question about it. But what we're noticing and what the research is showing is that you can be competitive while being collaborative. And you can root for somebody else, or you can really feel fabulous when someone does something in your team effort that brings you over the top, because you all are valued for your contribution. The other piece is, what's interesting in a lot of the research that shows is, if somebody is having something going on in their personal life, let's say a member of their family is very ill and they can't hold up their part of what they need to do, and someone else or two people take on their burden for a while, that it balances out. And that also, and it has nothing to do with the work world, it has to do with paying attention to the humanity of the person you're sitting next to, and that they have to take their child for chemotherapy every, whatever it is, that factors in, not in a negative way, because we really are collaborative and trying to accomplish this goal. So one of the things that we understand is the importance of gratitude, not only from our peers in the office or in our work environment, but also the gratitude that the supervisor shows us, or the boss, or on every level. How are people's successes celebrated? How are they noticed? And is it in a way that really means something to them? Do we encourage focus? And do we have environments where they can be focused? I'm sorry, there's something going on in the background. There's some noise going on.
It's okay.
And really, do we have environments where people are encouraged to, every time their computer pings, to lose their train of thought? Because creativity in the workplace is so valuable, but if you're constantly having to check 3 or 5 or 10 interruptions as you're trying to complete a thought, it's very challenging. The other thing is to pay attention, to listen. And how resilient are we? What are we doing to really engage and be resilient? And some of these workplace, in those particular 4, are being studied by Richie Davidson, who's a neuroscientist and who's really focusing on what happens to the brain when we are trying to be kind to ourselves and feel a sense of community, and what makes workplaces work better and more efficiently.
I would actually also, that's a great comment, all great comments. And I would also add that the way that the team works together influences the kindness that is demonstrated to the customer. Now, one of my jobs in the past was managing a team of telesales people. And these people took calls every day from customers who had concerns about their products. So there were about 20 people, and they all sat in little cubes side by side each other. And the common element was they all picked up the phone and they all talked to customers. So that in itself brought people together. So they would, if somebody was not feeling well, we would cover for their calls, and people were mentoring all the time. So if somebody said something that was inaccurate or whatever, we were able to coach them and help them, to improve. But what happened was the customer satisfaction went up, because what they were doing with the clients was kinder, more understanding, the qualities were imbued in their conversations with the most important person in the whole company, the customer. So that's another benefit that comes from this kind of kindness. It's not just in the workplace itself, but it extends out, to the world.
Well, we all are role models. And I think that what's important is that we're role models for each other, and we're also role models for the people that we really don't know. So if someone is calling and complaining and they're very frustrated, how do you deal with them? And can you really understand their frustration? And instead of reading off a script, I hear you are frustrated, but say, I can only imagine how difficult that is, that you've been, dealing with this for so long. And my job is to try and help you get through this, and we're really gonna work hard to solve this
Exactly.
together.
That is it. Exactly.
And so you hear them, you
them.
acknowledge it, and then you go forward. And I think that model of listening, paying attention, and then collaboratively trying to come to an end point is really important. And the other piece of it, and I'm so glad you mentioned this, Margaret, has to do with how do you bring yourself to work? Are you coming angry? Are you coming saying, oh, I have all of these people who are going to be complaining to me? And, what is the pep talk that you give all of those people?
Yeah.
And do you practice, say, whenever I get this kind of a call, I kind of get a dry mouth and I get really upset. So how can you desensitize that colleague, give them a chance to practice so that they're not going to be as concerned or upset the next time that call comes through?
Yeah.
This is collaboration. This is allowing people to be who they are, to say what their concerns are and their vulnerabilities, and to not be judgmental and say, oh boy, I felt that too. I'll tell you that in schools, when Amanda and I go and do training of teachers, how can you bring more kindness into your classroom? What can you do to be kind to a colleague? Yeah. What can you do to be kind to the children? And how do you deal with situations when the children are less than kind? Additionally, what happens when you have to interact with the parents who aren't so kind?
Yeah, so true.
Well, these teachers and staff need support from each other so that they can feel good about themselves as they try to improve the situation in their school or their college or whatever that is. And they have to take care of themselves. They need to breathe. They need to understand what it's like to either meditate or create a space where they can feel safe and just kind of go away for a few seconds or a few minutes and then come back refreshed. And have a colleague understand how important that is.
Yeah.
The other thing in the workplace is to encourage colleagues to take care of themselves and to really pay attention rather than say, rather than just get rewarded for how little sleep we get, how little we're eating, how much we're working, and how late we're staying, because so many of us reward each other for that. It's really what would happen. And this is happening in a lot of companies now. If we really focused on wellness, if we really understood how much better people functioned when they were healthier, when they ate better, when they exercised, when they rested, when they had breaks, when they were encouraged to have breaks, when they had programs that helped them deal with issues having to do with their children or their aging parent or health issues during lunchtime seminars. These are the things that give workers the idea that their company is caring about them. And when you feel that, you also have more of a motivation to invest more in that company.
There's a company in New Zealand, I think it's New Zealand or Australia, where they're giving them their employees every Wednesday off and paying them for the whole week. And on Wednesday, they get to go and do whatever they want. I wanted to mention one thing, which is important for this audience that we're talking to, which is a lot of the women in our community were teachers, for one thing, so they'll totally get what you're talking about. But also, they're not working now. And so they're not in that work environment. But I was thinking, just as you were talking, of how even as a non-working person, you can influence someone in the workplace. So, for example, if you go into a restaurant and someone is serving you and they do something that is just not appropriate or whatever, you can actually help them. You can actually be kind to them and not be cruel to them. You can actually make a suggestion. I don't know the number of times that I've actually gone to a manager and said, this is a really good hire, this person that you got here. She's been fantastic. We've really enjoyed our meal, or, you chose a great person. And their little face lights up because you just told the truth. I mean, you wouldn't say it if you didn't mean it, but it gives you an opportunity to take kindness outside the workplace into another workplace, into your retirement community.
I think that that's a brilliant, brilliant idea. The other thing is we are all role models. So we are role models for each other, but we are role models when we are going into, the restaurant. And if somebody's hassled, if our serving person is hassled, we can say, why don't we just take a moment? What's your name? And, I guess you had a difficult, you're really having a difficult day, or there's a lot going on
in here today. Yeah. It's super busy.
Yes. Yeah. And be the, it's okay to be the person who is giving the kindness, even if you're there to be served, because you never know what's going on in someone else's life.
Totally.
And if you reach out to them, I can't tell you how many times someone has said to me, I really appreciated your kindness because I've been having such a hard time. And you can or cannot take it to the next level, but just to know that is really wonderful.
Yeah.
People need that connection, and kindness is very much linked to improved health. People who volunteer, I know after retirement, many people volunteer, and volunteers are actually 10 times more likely to have improved health than people who don't volunteer across the board.
Yeah.
And they are also more likely to have less depression and feel that they have a purpose in their life, and they learn new things, and they're much more eager to be engaged.
Yeah.
Traveling to places that you've never been, learning something that's new, and engaging with people in another community, people you may not have met before, and learn something that's out of what's normal for you, and then see how you can infuse that new environment with kindness.
The simple concept of kindness, your book, The Kindness Advantage, you don't think it's going to take so many routes, it's going to go so many different directions, but kindness is such a powerful element. I'm so glad you've written the book with Amanda and that you are taking it out now into the world. And I just wish you all the best with it. And if you have any questions for Dr. Atkins, just leave it below, because I know she'll check in on the comments. I'll put them together and get them back to her, because this is an important conversation for all of us. So I want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart for being here and sharing your insights and your beautiful passion for kindness with us. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Our Patreon supporters help us to make a bigger difference in the lives of women over 60 all around the world. They get exclusive videos, live video shows, discounts, and much more. So please look for the link on this page. It is somewhere down here, up there. And join our tribe of women in our 60andMe community who are actually making a big difference in the world, challenging aging stereotypes. So thank you so much for your support.